Greetings from Tokyo, my dear friends. This is Daisuke, and I very much hope that this video finds you well and in very good spirits wherever you are in the world. And if you don't mind, I'd like to take this opportunity, if I may, to continue on with our journey, our exploration, our discussion with respect to the recent releases made by the Criterion Collection during this year of 2021. And that brings us to that title, which has been designated by Criterion at spine number 1077. This is a work from 1998. The filmmaker is Hou Hsiao-hsien. And the name of the work is, and please pardon me for my poor pronunciation, but it is Haixianghua, or in English, Flowers of Shanghai. This is the work from 1998, the extraordinary film from extraordinary filmmaker Hou Hsiao-hsien. And it has a brilliant cast, included in which are, for example, Tony Leung Chiu-wai and Michiko Hada and Michelle Reyes and Karina Lau, Rebecca Pan, Vicky Wei, Jack Cao. This is a great cast, and it is a great film. Again, from Hou Hsiao-hsien. It is called Haixianghua, or in English, Flowers of Shanghai. If we were to try to focus in on the plot or the story structure of this work, this extraordinary work, I think we can focus in on a number of fundamental elements of such plot or story structure. So, for example, we understand that this is a story that is taking place in Shanghai, or what is known as the British concession portion of this particular area, during the late 19th century or the late 1800s, during the Qing dynasty. And to be even more specific, we understand that it is taking place within certain specified, what are referred to as courtesan enclaves or flower houses. These are the houses in which these women, who are the specified characters of the film, these women who are courtesans, they work and live and they have their daily interactions with, say, the other people who live in the houses with them, who are also working in the same industry, and also the customers, the men who visit them, and they oftentimes visit them quite often, and to the point where, say, certain relationships, emotional relationships, are forged, and those bonds are created between the courtesans of the flower houses on the one hand and the men who visit them on the other. And so this forms the dynamic set of relationships that are the essence of the tale or series or number of tales that we see as part of the landscape of this film, Flowers of Shanghai. To be a little bit more specific about the plot, I mentioned that there are, say, a number of tales. And I say it in this way because this film can also be described in its plot terms as being a collection or gathering of a number of stories, because we see a group, a sort of tapestry of different, say, female characters, the courtesans or the women who are of these specific flower houses. And we see, for example, the characters of Crimson, played by Michiko Hada, and we see Emerald, played by Michelle Reyes, and Pearl, played by Karina Lau, And also there is Vicky Wei, who plays the character of Jasmine, etc. And we see their interactions also with the specific men who are a direct part of their life and with whom they have very deep-rooted and emotional relationships. So one of these sets of relationships is, of course, the relationship between the Tony Leung character, who is Master Wang, and the Michiko Hara character, who is Crimson. And we understand from the outset that they have a very strong relationship that is essentially suggesting that they are intimate, they are lovers. And yet also we understand that there is some tension in that relationship, and perhaps there is another courtesan that Master Wang is visiting, who is Jasmine. And so there is already this stage is set for a type of story involving heated passions, jealousy, a type of love triangle. And as the layers of this particular dramatic intrigue are lifted, we begin as viewers to understand and realize that maybe there is more to the situation than meets the eye. Maybe there is something fundamental and deep-rooted about the nature of the tension, the nature of the jealousy, and the reason why certain characters cannot necessarily get together the way that they might want, or the way that their hearts might be seeking or desiring, and what are thus therefore the emotional consequences of such situation. So this is one particular story, one particular tale, the Master Wang, Crimson, Jasmine storyline, or maybe basically or fundamentally speaking, the dynamic relationship between the Tony Leung character, Master Wang, and the Michiko Hara character, Crimson, and all the characterizations and all the subplots that emerge from this particular dramatic intrigue and emotional intrigue. So that's one, I think, fundamental tale here. Another very strong and fundamental tale involves another courtesan in another flower house. This is the Michelle Reyes character, who is called Emerald. And we see her and her interactions within her own house, or within the house where she is. For example, the interactions that she has with the Rebecca Pan character, and also how she is seeing, say, some of the younger women who are in the same house. And also what's so fascinating too about Emerald is how she is trying to, in essence, establish or further reestablish her strength and sense of self, and also a type of desire or quest or journey on her part to try ultimately, if at all possible, to buy her freedom and to leave this particular house, and what that means, what are the things that she has to do, and what it is at stake in terms of this type of journey that she is on, apparently. And in that vein too, what are the consequences of such journey if it's taken to its desired outcome? And so this is, I think, another very fundamental tale that is wrapped within this particular work, Flowers of Shanghai. And yet we see also other characters thrown, of course, in the mix of intrigue and drama and emotion and passion. And for example, we see the Karina Lau character, who is playing another courtesan in a flower house. Her character's name is Pearl, or is referred to as Pearl. And we see how she, for example, is trying to deal with a type of petty rivalry or jealousy, or sets of rivalries or jealousies that emerge within her own house and other women who are there. And so this is a revelatory detail about the nature of the possibility and the potential, but also the risks that these relationships that these women have with each other, and also with their clients, their clientele. And so that story, I think, is another type of microcosm presentation of the grand themes of the work, as it were, which is the emotional consequence of this type of environment, the way in which there is a subtle, perhaps, sense of authoritarian imposition, both, say, direct and indirect, and at the same time, maybe within or despite this type of imposition of authority, which comes again within the households, but also it comes from, say, the male-female dynamics that are presumed within the structure of the society that we see depicted in this film. Despite those terms, we also see the brilliant way that the film focuses in on the nature and intrigue and the strength of these women who are essentially trying to do all they can based on the societal situations that they find themselves in. And they are also carrying about, like human beings who have feelings, who have thoughts and emotions, who have dreams and ambitions, as well as human beings who want or who have a desire, who want the pleasure of the company of others, who want to have fun, who want to laugh, who want to have a good time, and what those mean, both, say, on a day-to-day innocent level, shall we say, or on a more fundamental and deep-rooted and significant level. And so we see, I think, the whole gamut of this type of, say, interaction or engagement, or the human condition as presented throughout with these various characters that are on display. And it is fascinating. And one of the brilliant things, or there are many brilliant things about this film, my friends, but one of those is the way the film captures this particular emotional landscape during this time. Now, this is really fascinating. The camera work is something that if one is watching this for the first time, you'll, I think, be struck by, because the nature of the film is, generally speaking, and for the most part, it is a collection or gathering of a series of long takes. Again, for the most part, there are some very key exceptions to this, but generally speaking, it is a gathering of long takes. And so we have scenes that are oftentimes just one shot, or a series of maybe 2 or 3 shots, but they are long takes with a camera that moves, that roams about with a certain degree of freedom. And we understand later that the cinematography, Mark Lee Pingbing, and how he was essentially given the ability to essentially capture what it was that he felt at the time, at the moment, was essential. And so he was given this, in essence, a type of carte blanche in terms of moving the camera where he wanted to, in order to capture the action of a particular scene. And I will get to this particular detail when we speak about the supplements. It's a fascinating detail, but it goes towards the importance of the visual style of the film, which gives it this gliding, almost dreamlike aspect. And these are long takes, but it's far from being it's not a static expression at all. On the contrary, it's very vivid and very dynamic, and it goes from character to character, from corner to another corner. But it always has a focus, or a central sort of objective or purpose to it. And so it takes its time in a beautiful, poetic way to present us, the viewers, with this information in this wonderful, stylistic way. The other thing, too, is this film employs a series of fades in and fades out. So in other words, we have, as I say, a series of generally speaking, long take compositions, and the edits between them are usually the fade to black and then emerging back into the next scene. So fade outs and then fade ins. So this type of hazy quality that is engendered with this editing device, together with this beautiful poetic gliding motion, dreamlike motion of the camera work, plus the lighting, and I'll mention a little bit more when I'm speaking about the presentation of this Criterion release. But the lighting too is very important. There is almost a type of sepia-like quality to the dimness of, or the delicate dimness of, the light scheme and the lighting structure and the composition. And we have a lot of lamp light, or a lot of very faded or very delicate light that is added, and that is further enhanced by the fades that are employed, and it gives the film this hue of a haze of dream-like quality. And to further give that a type of thematic and bold enhancement, we should recall one of the supplements here is a one-on-one discussion with the renowned and brilliant film critic, historian, and expert Tony Raines. And one of the things he remarks upon, which I think is a brilliant observation, is this is also a story that involves these flower houses and the clientele, the clients, the men who visit them. They visit their favorite courtesan women, and also they enjoy a meal or a drink, and also opium. And this, therefore, again, according to Tony Raines' perspective, or one of the interpretations that he posits, this could also be seen as a film that is like an opium dream, or a drug-induced type of hallucinatory style, visual style, and also sonic style that is engaged in order to tell the story of the various emotional engagements between these men and these women in the context of the flower houses of Shanghai in the late 19th century Qing dynasty. So there is a lot of stylistic verve and boldness that is applied here, which is also very startling and brilliant and striking when we recall the filmography and career in Hou Hsiao-hsien, and I will get to this detail in the latter half of this video when we talk about the supplements and essays, etc. But this is a way for me to try to express just how poetically beautiful this film is, how hallucinatory it is. It deals with what seems to be these moments of passion and drama and intensity that are expressed in these day-to-day goings-on of the courtesan houses. And a lot is revealed in dialogue and also in information that is provided to us after the fact. This is another striking thing. For the most part, this film gives us information through dialogue. It also gives us plot details, say, things and situations that occur off screen, which is another important detail of this, which is that this film takes place all within the indoors of these particular houses. We never, as viewers of the film, we never go beyond these houses. We never go outside and explore, say, the city landscape or anything of that sort. Everything takes place within the houses, and so we get the information that's presented during these visits. Also, we get information in the dialogue or the conversations that we are also witness to. When we see the drinking parties and the games and the men and women around the table, and then the intimate settings between between a couple in particular here or there, and the surprises, the delights, and the jealousies and the betrayals and the disappointments that also emerge. all the way through with this variety and tapestry of this cast of characters. So this is, I think, a film that is about the human experience. This is a film about passions and disappointments. It is also about the day-to-day goings-on and how men and women in this society, or this particular part of society, how they are essentially trying to forge or to discover some kind of human connection or bond, whether they are successful or not. That is part of each particular tale all the way to its conclusion. But in any event, this is a way of capturing a type of human experience that is very emotional, that's very deep, and it's also presented in this wonderfully multi-layered and poetic way. That is Hou Hsiao-hsien and the Flowers of Shanghai presentation. So there is so much here embedded and worked into the very fabric of the film. And it's a film that I think is worth watching many, many times if you can. I had the great fortune of being able to see this when it was released in limited release in New York. Many, many years ago when I was a student, so this would have been around the late 90s or so. And so that was an extraordinary experience for me to be able to see it in the theater. And then I was able to get my hands on a US DVD release of it, which is right here. However, the presentation of this, although it was really good for what it was at the time, I thought there were certain issues that I had with this particular presentation, especially when I tried to remember how I felt and what the film looked to me at the time when I saw it in the theater versus this DVD. It's a good DVD, but now with those memories and with that experience of the theater, we have this Criterion release, and I'll try to get to that discussion in the next portion of this video. But this is, in other words, this is a film that I have seen since its initial limited theatrical run in the United States, and it has stayed with me in a very deep and strong way. And the first time I saw it, I had to really concentrate and try to keep up with all the intrigue of what was going on, because a lot of it was expressed in the dialogue. So I admit that there was a lot that I didn't catch and it went over my head. But I think that a film like this is worth watching and rewatching and rewatching and rewatching. And when you do, the details begin to emerge. And when they do, wow, this becomes this dream, this hallucinatory type of dream-like situation, but it is also rooted in the powerful and really understandable and sometimes even volcanic and intense emotional outbursts and also emotional states of being that I think are universal and understandable by virtually everyone. And so, and that is, I think, the power of this. It has this beautiful look about it, and the period detail that is so intricate and so it's so lovely, and the atmosphere that's engendered. It creates the sense of a timelessness, or let me take that back. It creates a sense of a time that is no longer there, because it is a time that is past. At the same time, it is also very much an understandable and deeply relatable story of human emotions. And that's what makes it such a powerful and such a brilliant expression of cinema from one of the great artists, Hou Hsiao-hsien. This is Hai Xiang Hua, or Flowers of Shanghai. The Criterion Collection has released this film, Flowers of Shanghai, at spine number 1077, and it is purported to be based on a new 4K digital restoration. And this is a very interesting presentation of this work. Now, as I mentioned a few moments ago, I had the great fortune of being able to watch this film in the theater when it was initially released. And so that was a long time ago, so my memories, I admit, of that screening are quite distant indeed. Perhaps there is the haze in my memory, akin to perhaps the type of haze that we see, the glow and the sepia tone glow that we see associated with the look of this film in general. But that is also my way of trying to express that I do have this feeling or this memory about the film that when I was able to get, after the fact, this particular DVD, as much as I really love this DVD for being able to rely on this to revisit and revisit and revisit the film Flowers of Shanghai, I do admit that the presentation of this film on this particular DVD release was somewhat different than how I remember the film when I saw it in the theater. And it felt a little bit brighter. It felt a little bit more, hotter in terms of the light intensity in some of the key sequences. And so, but this is what I was relying on in terms of a home media release. Now with Criterion, we have this new 4K digital restoration that is the basis of this release. Now, I find it very intriguing, incredibly intriguing. First of all, it seems to have a certain level of delicacy in terms of the softness of the light. It's much softer than this particular DVD release, and I prefer that. And that seems to me to be something that feels like closer to that feeling that I had when I saw it in the theater. And so there is that sense of the delicacy of the light, and how it's very delicate, especially in darkness and shadow when everything else is enveloped therein. And so we have the beauty and the almost transcendental beauty of the dim level of the light as it slowly fades up and fades out. So that, I think, is very intriguing about the look and presentation of it. Also, I should say too, what is so intriguing, and I admit that I'm not quite sure exactly how I feel about it, but what is so intriguing is for a number of scenes, as I indicated, the film fades to black, or then or fades out into black, or fades in from black. And so we go, and these are the connectors, essentially the editing connectors from scene to scene to scene. And so what this means is we have black, and then we have sometimes title cards with red. But then we have fading into a particular scene, and then fading back into black, and then fading back into another scene. So the fading from black, and then the fading to black, and then from black to another scene is pretty much constant. I never noticed it in the earlier release that I had, and I don't recall, unfortunately, what the details were in the initial screening that I was able to see. But what's intriguing about this particular release is when it fades into black and then from black. For example, some of the lamp lighting effects, if you see, say, a lamp light that registers, say, a soft yellowish orange glow to it, which I think is reasonably associated with light, right, and how it registers on film. During the fades into and from black, though, sometimes you'll see those little orbs of light be maybe a little bit red, and then they'll turn orange, or they'll be a little bit green, and then they'll turn orange. So it has this transformative effect from, say, a soft green color into the lighter, soft orange of the light that will then carry through with the film. So this type of transformation from different colors of light is something that I never noticed before. And so I found that to be, as I say, the word I used is intriguing, because I'm not sure how I feel about that. Again, it's an element that I'm not quite used to, and so it could be something that I might resist as a viewer who is very much a big fan of this film. But the more I thought about it, and as I was watching the film, the more I realized that it could be a way to further remind me as a viewer about how this is almost like the malleable sense of a drug-induced dream, in terms of the warping of reality. And also the warping of reality could involve, in visual terms anyway, the transformation from one color to another color. And if that's the case, that's a very, I think, interesting way to further suggest this idea of the warping of reality, as it were. Now, I don't think it's constant, right? It just happens very subtly, in a very subtle move, and then the scene carries on, of course. So I don't want to suggest that this is a type of psychedelic exercise that runs throughout the entirety of the film, but it does happen here and there in these subtle, brief moments that are still very noticeable. And so that's something that I will still try to work with and engage with as I further explore this and rewatch this in the coming months and years with this particular Criterion release. But those are some examples of where I am very much engaged with, to a certain degree anywhere, to certain degrees, with this particular Criterion release, or the presentation that it is purported to be based upon. So that's the presentation of this particular film. And also, when we're talking about the Criterion release itself, we also know that Criterion includes a number of supplements. There are a number of supplements here, and on paper they might not seem like a lot in quantity, but my goodness, in terms of quantity, they excel. They are truly, truly excellent, and I'll try to explain why. First off, we have, as part of the supplements, we have a one-on-one discussion, which is described as being from 2021. This is with Tony Raines, approximately 28 minutes. Now, Tony Raines is a very famous film scholar, a specialist in, for example, Asian cinema, and he is an expert in the cinema of Hou Hsiao-hsien, and he knows this film thoroughly, oh so thoroughly. He is an expert, a connoisseur, a brilliant film critic and historian, Tony Raines. And here we have a one-on-one conversation with him where he speaks about, gives brief background into the career of Hou Hsiao-hsien in the context of Taiwan cinema and his importance as a leading figure in what is known as the new Taiwan cinema wave of films and filmmakers, and also the very interesting way in which this film, Flowers of Shanghai, figures into the career of Hou Hsiao-hsien, because Tony Raines reminds us that in general, Hou Hsiao-hsien's career leading up to Flowers of Shanghai, in other words, the films that he made prior to Flowers of Shanghai, tended to be revolving around modern day local stories involving Taiwan, and stories about Taiwan and people who are living there in the present day. And so in that context, a film like Flowers of Shanghai is very different than many of the other past works of Hou Hsiao-hsien, right? Because it's set not in Taiwan, but it's set in Shanghai, although we understand from the production details that it was actually made in Taiwan as well, and we'll get to that as with another supplement. But it is set in Shanghai in terms of the story, and also it is set not in the present day, but it is set in the late 19th century Qing dynasty. And also what's interesting too, which emerges elsewhere just on this topic, it emerges actually in the interview, which is with Michael Berry, which is part of this great booklet. Another detail that emerges in that context is the film Flowers of Shanghai is also distinct from, say, the earlier works of Hou Hsiao-hsien in that he is working with a number of what could be described as being international film stars from many parts of the globe. And this includes a number of very famous film stars from Hong Kong, Tony Leung and Michelle Race and Karina Lau, and also from Japan, Ichiko Hara, etc. And so this is also considered to be something that's very different from the type of, say, actors that Hou Hsiao-hsien would be working with in his earlier works. So in these and other details, I think Flowers of Shanghai is a very unique work in the context of Hou Hsiao-hsien's career. And so this is one aspect that Tony Raines brings up, but also he does bring up the another aspect about how there could be said to be a sense of continuity in terms of dealing with history and dealing with the human stories that exist in the context of history. And I think Tony Raines brings up as a means of very effective comparison another film by Hou Hsiao-hsien, which is known in English as A City of Sadness, and how this is an example of Hou Hsiao-hsien dealing with a certain period of history and the emotional consequences thereof, and how in that vein Hou Hsiao-hsien is concerned with some kind of historical context. And so this is there could be a type of a continuity thread that could be weaved with Flowers of Shanghai and Hou Hsiao-hsien's earlier filmography and subsequent filmography as well. And this is also, I think, expressed in the way in which sometimes the film or the film style. And I mentioned that the cinematographer is Mark Lee, and so Mark Lee has this way of using the camera to a roving or traveling camera, as it were, to capture information. And this is a technique that we will see in certain other works by Hou Hsiao-hsien. So Mark Lee Ping Bing's cinematography, has this power that also has the thread of continuity to a certain degree anyway with other works of Hou Hsiao-hsien. And also in the Tony Raines discussion, he speaks about the underlying work that this film is based upon. And this is Han Ziyun's work. This is the Sing Song Girls of Shanghai, and how this was a work from the 1880s, and it was written or presented in Wu dialect. And I understand Wu dialect is the dialect that was prevalent in the Zhejiang province, which I understand is near Suzhou and Shanghai. In any event, the dialect or the Wu dialect work was then translated into Mandarin Chinese by Eileen Chang. And we understand from the interview with Michael Berry that, in fact, it was the Mandarin Chinese version that Hou Hsiao-hsien first became familiar with. And he indicated that he read through it, and we understand from various descriptions here and elsewhere that it's considered sometimes to be a somewhat challenging work to get through, because there are so many characters. There are, I think, over 100 characters, and there are different stories, and the first person or third person, the use of that is a very interesting structure. For example, it's like a third person is used where first person would otherwise be employed in similar situations and the like. And so but Hou Hsiao-hsien discovered and explored the work in the Mandarin Chinese version, And then based on his excitement with the material, he decided to want to make this film. And the production details about this film are really fascinating as well, and I'll talk about that in the context of another supplement. But for these reasons and other reasons, and also, I'm sorry, one more thing about the Tony Raines discussion, which is excellent, 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 by the way. He goes into a type of scene analysis with certain portions of the film. And he's talking, I mentioned earlier, about his interpretation or thesis about this film being a visual style that could be said to be representing in a subjective/objective way the opium-induced dream state, which then makes for the gliding movement of the camera, the fades, the delicacy of the light, the beautiful and dreamlike way in which the music interweaves itself into the proceedings and the environment. But then there are also some stark and shocking and abrupt exceptions to this type of filmmaking. And Tony Raines gives us two examples of this that are quite famous in the context of the film. One involves a quick shot of what we understand is a very ornate hairpin, and another is a very famous sequence which we could interpret as being the first person bird's eye, or the first person perspective from one of the major characters of the film, the character of Wang, played by Tony Leung, and a very key scene that this technique is being employed. So these are some very vivid and striking exceptions that Tony Raines discusses in great detail in a very lovely analytical way that's also very easy to understand. So a wonderful conversation with Tony Raines. It makes me wish that Tony Raines could have given, if he had also been able to provide a commentary track, a full feature-length commentary track for this film, that would have been absolutely sublime. Wow. But in any event, we still get this conversation with Tony Raines, which is excellent. Please check it out if you can. Again, this is approximately 28 minutes. Then, continuing on, we have an interview with Hou Hsiao-hsien. This is described as being from 2015, and it's the Academy of Motion Pictures Arts and Sciences Visual History Program Collection. And it's approximately 13 minutes, and so we have the interviewer asking a number of questions about the genesis of the project and about the filmmaking process and certain stylistic devices, the one take or one scene per day style that he essentially complied with or espoused in the making of this film. Again, pardon me for my poor pronunciation, but it's called Yi Chang in terms of the one takes process. And also Hou Hsiao-hsien earlier in the conversation talks about the genesis of this work. And in fact, the plan had been to make a film that was not at all the Han Ziyun work itself, but in fact it would have been a work that would have been focusing on this the person of Zheng Chenglong, who is what's described as being the Ming Dynasty loyalist who rebelled against the Qing dynasty. And so the story would have been focusing on this particular person, and that brought the production, or in pre-production phase anyway, to Japan, because this person was born in the Japanese place of Hirado, and so that would have meant working with the municipality, the government of Hirado. But unfortunately, due to circumstances involving the death of the mayor of the city, those plans fell through. And during this time, we understand that Hou Hsiao-hsien was also, in terms of his preparation for the historical accuracy and details of this particular project, he became more aware of the history involving the courtesan houses, and that led to his discovery or introduction to the Han Ziyun work. And that inspired him so much that he ended up wanting to make the film, which ended up becoming Flowers of Shanghai. And indeed, that production is also very complicated and fascinatingly complicated indeed, because there were plans then to have the film shot, made in Shanghai, but unfortunately, due to the script not being approved by the relevant authorities in Shanghai, it couldn't be made there. And so then it was decided to take all the period details that could be assembled and gathered in Shanghai, but then go to Taiwan and construct these houses in Taiwan, in certain places in Taiwan, that would serve as the settings for the film. Again, the film it's set in Shanghai, but in fact it was made in terms of its production in Taiwan. And in fact, we'll get to this in another supplement, which is fascinating. The production actually constructed these houses to period detail, what's known as the Shikumen style architecture houses for each of the flower houses that we see. And so these are actual working houses. They aren't necessarily sound stages per se. And so that is such an interesting facet of this, and it goes towards the beautiful precision and design that goes into the period detail that they were trying to capture. And we'll talk about the production design in the the discussion of the next supplement. But this one-on-one interview with Hou Hsiao-hsien is essential, totally essential. If you are interested in Flowers of Shanghai and the works of Hou Hsiao-hsien, please watch this. And it ends with a really intriguing question about what films Hou Hsiao-hsien thinks he will be remembered by, or I'm paraphrasing that particular question. And his response is amazing. So please check it out if you can. Once again, this is the interview with Hou Hsiao-hsien, approximately 13 minutes from 2015. And that's not all, because then we get a type of making of documentary which is called Beautiful Realism. And this is by Daniel Rame and Eugene Suen. And this is described as being from 2021, approximately 37 minutes. We get some behind-the-scenes footage, production footage, Hou Hsiao-hsien at work in these, as I say, these houses that were constructed and that were working houses of the Shikumen architecture design to represent these what are described as the courtesan enclaves or flower houses for each of the stories that we are engaged with in this film. We also hear from director of photography, cinematographer Mark Lee Pingbing, and also producer and editor Liao Qing-sung, and production designer Huang Wenying, and sound recordist Tu Du Qie. And this is very important. These discussion points are really essential. For example, Tu Du Qie talks about the sound and the challenges of working with these particular settings that they were shooting in, because they were shooting in places where the sounds, the everyday sounds of the outdoors, like the trains that would come by, or the airplanes that would fly overhead to indicate details of the modern day, those would still be within hearing distance when the people would be shooting. And there's actually some moments in the behind the scenes documentary portion of this where you can see the shooting stop because you can hear a plane go overhead. So these were the types of challenges in terms of sound landscape design that they were dealing with, but they were still trying to espouse this type of approach to the sets and designs in order to achieve a sense of authenticity in the air and to give further weight to the performances that were working with these particular details. So really interesting. And then the production designer, Huang Wenying, this is a really essential portion, essential component of this film. It is crucial to point out the design and it is so intricate, so beautiful, so ornate, and so luxurious. And so it makes us, it invites us into the world, and still at the same time it creates the sense of closeness but also distance. And the distance is also generated by the fact that this feels like these are details that are a part of a different place and time altogether, but there is a closeness as well because it feels real, and there's a palpability, and there's a sense of touch, and the creaking of the wood, or the way that the light peeks through the little openings of the doorways, or something of that effect. So these can only be part of a real life, real world design. So that type of wonderfully poetic paradox in terms of the look and design is brilliant, and one of the brilliant aspects of this. And also I mentioned Mark Lee Pingbing and how he has his camera, and essentially another way to think about it is it's almost like he's editing within the shot itself. Like if there are a number of characters within a particular sequence, he will decide where to go. And we understand also that he was given, as I say, it was carte blanche, or more or less free rein, to essentially cover what it was he felt was important at that particular moment, which is extraordinary. It shows or indicates the degree of trust that Hou Hsiao-hsien has with his fellow artists, including the director of photography, and also how the camera movement is almost like its own editing within the shot. I think that's the phrase that's sometimes employed. And so there is this beautiful dynamism that is at play here. And speaking of the word beautiful, the title of this work is Beautiful Realism. The significance of this title, I must stress this. It is very important because it's also what Mark Lee Pingbing is talking about, which is trying to capture a sense of realism on the one hand, but it is also a dream-like type of almost illusion on the other. And this came into play specifically in the discussion about the lighting and the intensity of the lighting, and how Mark Lee Pingbing and his lighting scheme was developed based on early conversations with Hou Hsiao-hsien and company. But during the filming, I think Hou Hsiao-hsien had felt ultimately that it was too bright, and so they were trying to find the balance, and ultimately I think an approach was recognized where the degree or the intensity of lighting that was used would be reduced, thus achieving this overall aged sepia look to the lighting palette. But in this conversation, the phrase beautiful realism comes up, which presents this wonderfully, I think, purposely applied poetic paradox that is at the very heart of the style of this film, namely the attempt at trying to achieve a sense of realism in the design, in the setting, in the props, in the decor, in the language as well, but also the acknowledgement that it is a poetic, a type of hallucination or hallucinatory-like movement, or a type of feeling that may or may not be a dream. And so that type of paradox is, I think, at the heart of what makes this film so powerful and so successful as a work of cinema. So all in all, again, please check this out if you can. This is approximately 37 minutes. And this is just, my goodness, and also, I'm sorry, before I move on to the other topics, this documentary too does mention, for example, Pauline Chan and her very crucial work, because of course, they have this great performance by Michiko Hada, who plays Crimson. Michiko Hada is a Japanese actress, and she spoke Japanese, the Japanese language, during filming, because it was the language that she was most comfortable with and that she could express herself in. And so but her lines, of course, needed to be in not in Japanese, but it's in we understand it's in Suzhou dialect of the Chinese language, and so that had to be dubbed in, and we understand that this was dubbed in by Pauline Chen and her great work. So and actually Pauline Chen is referred to also in the interview that we find in the booklet here. Pauline Chen and her excellent work on this film, and then the unfortunate circumstances that befell her after the fact. And so, but her work, I think, is recognized, and deservedly so. And Michiko Hara's performance is brilliant, deservedly so. And also the voice acting is I'm so glad it's mentioned here. And also there's a mention about the great music by Yoshihiro Hanno. It's this dream-like theme, and the genesis for the use of this particular music is also discussed. So again, please check out this great documentary called Beautiful Realism. And I should say also that there is a trailer included as well, so please check out the trailer. It's a very fascinating one, and it's always fun to check out the trailer, so please check that out too if you can. And that is not all. Well, that's it for the supplements that are included in the disc. So it might seem, as I say, somewhat low in quantity, but I do want to emphasize or re-emphasize that in terms of quality, this is absolutely stellar. So please check those out if you can. Also, we have this, and I've taken this out prior to the start of this video. This is the booklet that is included with this release. It is a stapled booklet. My goodness, this is great. It is what, 45 pages. So well done. I am a huge fan of the booklets because you can get these wonderful pictures, but also you can get a wealth, hopefully a wealth of writings, and here we get a lot. So first we have this great essay. It's one of the best essays I've read this year so far, called Inside the Dream by Jean Ma. And this is an extraordinary essay. It is so well organized, and Jean Ma, her way about explaining the background of the genesis of the story, and also the significance of Han Ziyun and the Sing-Song Girls of Shanghai, and how Hou Hsiao-hsien and his career and the trajectory of this, how it fits into his filmography, and yet it is also a type of outlier in his filmography. And also the style, and it's almost like a dream or hallucination or a type of drug-induced fervor of an experience, but it's also rooted in a type of human emotional universal understandability and accessibility. And so this essay is another fantastic point of this overall release. Again, the Jean Ma essay, please check it out. It's called Inside the Dream. Wonderful and brilliant. But that's not all, because we also get, and it's quite substantive, Interview with Hou Hsiao-hsien by Michael Berry. This is, again, I read it a number of times, and every time I was just in awe. I was so in awe of this particular interview. I learned so many things from this, and I cannot stress enough how great this particular set of writings is. So we have the Jean Ma essay, but also the Interview with Hou Hsiao-hsien by Michael Berry. A number of things come up. Some things have been discussed in previous supplements. So for example, we talk about the genesis and how it ended up being a different story altogether, and ended up going to the Han Ziyun work, and also talking about the focus on Hou Hsiao-hsien and his style, and certain details that are surprising in terms of what his responses are. I mentioned how Tony Raines is talking about a particular shot involving a hairpin, which is very startling in terms of the way it's very different and strikingly different from the rest of the basic visual style philosophy of the film. Hou Hsiao-hsien also speaks about this particular scene, and his response as to why he used that is it's genius, absolutely genius. I didn't know this until I read it here, and when I read his response, I was floored in a great way, and it's just another testament to the brilliance of Hou Hsiao-hsien. The interview also talks about the language or the dialect that is used, or that was decided to be used, which is the Shanghai dialect, or I understand it's called the Suzhou dialect. And I am not a Chinese speaker, and I don't know the language, so I am unfamiliar with the distinctions and differences between, say, this dialect and Putonghua, or this Mandarin dialect. So I'm not quite sure. But according to the discussion with Michael Berry and Hou Hsiao-hsien, there are some differences that are noticeable to anyone who is fluent in the language. And it's really interesting too, which is that some of the actors who were working on the film, they had direct, say, experience through, say, their family or background and their careers in speaking the dialect that was necessary for this particular story. So, for example, Karina Lau is mentioned, Rebecca Pan is mentioned, Michelle Race is mentioned as well. It's mentioned how maybe she didn't necessarily know it immediately or directly, but she had family and so she had that experience in terms of her background, and so she could pick it up for purposes of her performance, at least according to the interview here. So this is really fascinating. And also another added detail to this, which is apparently there's also a difference or distinction between so-called modern day Suzhou dialect and the dialect that would have been prevalent at the time of the late 1800s or the late 19th century Qing dynasty. And so even within the speakers of the dialect who were well versed in that particular dialect, there was a certain sense of maybe a modern way in which they were speaking that was perhaps not always in keeping with the traditional way of the dialect. And so that is a very interesting detail that, again, goes way above my head because I'm not a speaker of the language, but another fascinating detail as to why this interview is remarkable and essential. And so to conclude, the writings in the booklet are another essential aspect of this particular, say, Criterion release. I am so happy that they were included. Again, the essay and the interview, they both, in their own ways, present the information and the background and details in such a fascinating manner. I learn something new every time. So I cannot stress enough just how much I really adore these particular writings. I really do. I think that this is one of the strongest set of writings that I have come across in the Criterion collection, which always presents strong writings, but this in particular, it strikes me so much and so deeply. So I want to recommend strongly you check those out. Once again, watch the film first, and then check out the writings. And hopefully, and then watch the film again, and then reread the essays again. Hopefully, you will enjoy those. So with that, my friends, this is the Criterion release of Flowers of Shanghai from Hou Hsiao-hsien. I perhaps am showing in my discussion of this film just how much I adore this. I really adore this. I adore the works of Hou Hsiao-hsien, and I adore this film. And I acknowledge that this is a film that is very different from, arguably, very different from the other works of Hou Hsiao-hsien, but at the same time, there is a strong sense of continuity. And we know that we are watching a film that is made in the hands of a great master, because the work is startling. It is complex, it is a paradox, it is a puzzle, it is also a dream, a hallucination, and also an emotional voyage that is packed with intensity, humor, drama, and so much intrigue that keeps one wanting more and more and more, and to watch it over and over and over again. What a brilliant film this is. Flowers of Shanghai. Okay, my friends, so that's it for now. And so until we meet again, please be happy and healthy and well, and please keep on watching a lot of great, great movies. Thank you so much, as always, for your time. I very much appreciate it. Stay strong, stay safe, and cheers.